Most of Week 10 is in the books, and it started back on Thursday night with a game between the Raiders and Broncos. The Broncos defeated the Raiders with a score of 10-7, and I thought this game was the perfect representation of the Raiders' season. The Raiders won the turnover battle 2-1, they forced the Broncos into 4 straight 3-and-outs to start the game, and they held them to 10 points, and they lost. And this game had every sort of frustration within it for the Raiders, and they also had a punt blocked, 9 penalties, a missed field goal, and a touchdown wiped out due to a penalty. Brock Bowers had 12 receptions for 127 yards and 3 touchdowns in Week 9, just 4 days prior to this game being played, and on Thursday night against Denver, had 1 reception for 31 yards. This year, in a lot of ways, is a nightmare for the Raiders, and the missed opportunities along with poor play is a perfect representation of the 2025 Raiders. With Denver, we have to start by saying 8-2 is 8-2, but we can also say that outside of the Cowboys game in Week 8, and of course the fourth quarter against the Giants, the last 5 games offensively have been concerning. But between travel across the pond and short weeks mixed in between, the Broncos keep winning. And Broncos fans would also acknowledge, and have acknowledged, the offense has to pick up, and everyone knows that. But the defense is on a historic pace as they have the most sacks in the first 10 games of a season since 1990 with 46, and they've been holding their own, or more than holding their own, without Pat Surtain, the reigning defensive player of the year. And Denver plays Kansas City in Week 11, and that's going to be a very, very big test for this team. The Colts beat the Falcons 31-25 in Germany in one of the best games of Jonathan Taylor's career. In this game, Jonathan Taylor had 244 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns, including an 83-yard run, and if there's any takeaway from this game, it's that Jonathan Taylor is legitimately in the MVP conversation. The Colts offense as a whole did not have a good game in Week 9 against Pittsburgh, and it was good to see them put up 31 points in Week 10 against an Atlanta defense that has forced several teams to struggle this year, most notably Buffalo on Monday night in Week 6. I thought Daniel Jones took a few bad sacks in this game, but also hit a few timely throws, which is ultimately what matters most, and especially the big throw to Tyler Warren in overtime. And Indy enters their Week 11 bye with an 8-2 record, and it is not an exaggeration to say one of the biggest games of the entire 2025 season will be played off of their bye when they go to Kansas City in Week 12. With the Falcons, this was a frustrating loss for several reasons, but I would say one of the most frustrating parts of this loss was Tyler Algier having 11 carries, with Bijan having just 17, while watching Jonathan Taylor have 32 carries on the other side of the ball. It's also frustrating watching Michael Penix miss throws that, if we are being honest, an NFL quarterback should hit too. And I've said this before, but the Falcons are an incredibly frustrating team, and this game was another example. And a lot of that as well falls on coaching, and with the current coaching staff this team has, the reality is they will always be limited. The game of the year happened at MetLife Stadium in Week 10 as the Jets defeated the Browns 27-20 in a game where Breece Hall had 125 yards and a touchdown. Justin Fields finished the day 6 of 11 with 54 yards, and no, that's not an exaggeration, as the Jets' other 2 touchdowns came by way of special teams. And people can say it's the Browns all they want, but this was a big win for the Jets because of who they traded this week. They traded 2 of their best players in Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams and came off the bye and won. Outside of that, this was a very tough game to watch, and Garrett Wilson finished the game with 0 receptions to give you an idea of how this game was for the Jets offensively. With Cleveland, I'm at the point where I think this offseason is a good time for a reset all the way around. This is already not a good team, really excluding the 2025 draft class, which looks to be good, but they're poorly coached and have been for years. And the best thing that can come out of this season for Cleveland is getting the number 1 overall pick with a new GM and head coach. I don't think Dylan Gabriel played particularly bad in this game, but I think he is a very limited player, and I do wonder how long it is until they decide to give Shedeur Sanders a chance. And unfortunately, the Browns right now are a truly depressing team to watch at times. The Bears came back and beat the Giants 24-20 in a game they were down 20-10 with 5 minutes left in the game. This was a big come-from-behind win for the Bears because, like we've said a lot of times this year, the 2024 Bears do not win this game. And the biggest takeaway I think you have to have for the Bears is this was a game Caleb Williams played his tail off in the fourth quarter and won. And not only that, but the defense that allowed 42 points to Cincinnati in Week 9 stepped up and made stops when they needed to. And the Giants' final 3 possessions of the game were 2 punts and a turnover on downs. And the Bears' final 2 drives, excluding the final kneel down of course, were 2 touchdowns, one of which was 91 yards. They're 6-3 and they can beat the Vikings in week 11, and there is a very real reality where the Chicago Bears are 7-3. With New York, obviously you have to start with Jackson Dart leaving the game with a concussion, but the difference between him being out there and Russell Wilson being out there was obvious, and my takeaway is this is a team that's 2-8, and yes, they've dealt with their injuries, but this is a team being led by a rookie quarterback, and when he was done, in a lot of ways, it was over, and I don't know how long of a leash you can continue to give Brian Daboll. Kicking a field goal on the 1-yard line, to me, in 2025 is inexcusable, and by playing not to lose, guess what? The Giants lost, and I think the major takeaway is that Brian Daboll should be let go, because I would ask the question, how far or how long does this continue to go? The Patriots went down to Tampa and beat the Bucs with a score of 28-23, and Drake May threw for 270 yards and 2 touchdowns as the Patriots improved to 8-2. This was a huge Sunday for the Patriots, not just because they won, but also because the Bills lost to the Dolphins, which we'll get to in a minute, but this was the 7th straight win for the Patriots. There were certainly some up and down moments in this game, but what I was also excited to see was TreVeyon Henderson finally breaking through as he had a 147-yard, 2-touchdown performance. It was also good to see Kyle Williams have a big play too, as he had a 72-yard touchdown, and the Patriots' next 3 opponents are home against the Jets, at the Bengals, and home against the Giants, and there's a very real scenario where the Patriots are 11-2 entering their Week 14 bye. Drake May. With Tampa, this was a frustrating loss coming off of their Week 9 bye because this was a winnable game. The play calling at times for Tampa, specifically with the screens, was incredibly frustrating, and Tampa had a chance to win with 2 minutes to play, but ultimately turned the ball over, and TreVeyon Henderson scored a 69-yard touchdown to effectively seal the deal. Some would say it was a nice run by TreVeyon Henderson. Tampa has a few difficult games coming up, but I still think they're going to win the division, but there's no doubt this was a frustrating loss. The Texans defeated the Jags 36-29, and a huge credit goes to the Texans for winning this game because Jacksonville was up 29-10 with 13 minutes left in the 4th quarter, yet Houston had 26 unanswered, including a touchdown on the final play of the game to seal the win. And Davis Mills led a 93-yard touchdown drive to win the game and led the 2nd biggest comeback in Texans history. And I think there should be a conversation about the quarterback position this week in the Space City. And joking, of course. Now, I have been very critical of offensive coordinator Nick Caley, but I am a huge give credit where it's due person, and he called a tremendous game in Week 10. The Texans have had some very frustrating losses this year, but they play Tennessee next week, and 5-5 is a very real scenario for this team. With Jacksonville, I don't know what to say other than how frustrating or maddening of a loss this is, and this was a game that shouldn't have been close. The Jags have a few favorable opponents coming up, and they should be 6-3 right now, with a clear path to get 10 wins. And outside of the 21-yard run from Trevor Lawrence with 30 seconds left, the Jags offense had 2 yards in the entire 4th quarter. The Texans offense was out there for the majority of the 4th quarter, and when the Jags needed to make a play most, they couldn't. It was 2 3-and-outs that took a total of 3 minutes and 18 seconds off the clock for the Jags in the 4th quarter, again prior to the final drive. And if you wanted to win the division, this was a game you couldn't afford to lose, especially against a backup quarterback. The Ravens beat the Vikings 27-19, and I think if there is anything both fan bases from this game can agree on, it's that it was an ugly game. Neither team looked particularly great, and in a lot of ways, I thought it was more of a Ravens taking advantage of Minnesota's mistakes type game than anything, and good for them. Good teams find ways to win, and 3 weeks ago we knew the Ravens were not a true 1-5 team, and now they play the Browns and Jets in consecutive weeks, and the path to 6-5 for them is there. And I don't know how much the national media will cover this, but I thought Nate Wiggins played a tremendous game, and I thought he had Justin Jefferson in hell for a lot of the game, which should be a huge confidence booster moving forward for him. With Minnesota, this was an incredibly frustrating loss because the opportunity to win was there. JJ McCarthy threw 2 interceptions, and if I'm being honest, I thought he threw a third to Roquan Smith, but the first interception in particular was bad because there was a clear running lane in front of him. This team also had over 100 yards in penalties, and there was a lack of focus on a lot of the drives in Week 10 for the Vikings, as they had 8 false starts, and Justin Jefferson did not look anything like Justin Jefferson in this game. And this was a very preventable loss because the defense did a good job in stopping the Ravens' offense, all things considered. The Saints defeated the Panthers 17-7 in Week 10, and after the Panthers beat the Packers in Week 9, I said I wanted to see this team beat New Orleans and Atlanta in Weeks 10 and 11 to really try and start to believe in this team, and they didn't, and they put up 7 points at home against a 1-8 team, and this was a game that you needed to win because the Bucs also lost in Week 10, and competing for the NFC South was right there. Bryce Young was not good in this game, as he threw for 124 yards and an interception, and this is my frustration. I absolutely hate the Super Bowl or bust mentality with quarterbacks, but this was a game that you needed to win as a franchise to take the next step, and you were outgained by over 200 yards and lost by double digits. And this game is why I never bought into the idea of the Carolina Panthers meaning as serious competitors. Now, on the other side of this, good for Tyler Shuck, man. 282 yards and 2 touchdowns in a road division win against a winning team. And I didn't like the Rashid Shaheed trade for Tyler Shuck, obviously, because that was taking a weapon away from him, but the reality of this situation is he played really well in Week 10, and the remainder of the 25 season is an extended tryout for him, and he was the best quarterback on the field in this game by far. I'm not having the discussion of whether or not he's the guy, but this was certainly a breath of fresh air for Saints fans. The Dolphins, yes, the Miami Dolphins, beat the Bills by 17 points in one of the most stunning games in 2025. Devon Achane ran for 174 yards and 2 touchdowns and also had an additional 51 yards receiving for a 225-yard game in what was one of the most memorable Dolphins games over the past few years. Miami is now 3-7 on the year, and they play Washington in Week 11, and with former GM Chris Grier no longer in the building, some people may be thinking Super Bowl for the Dolphins if they win out. And it was a good team win for Miami, who has now quietly won 2 of their last 3 games. Jokes aside, of course, on the Super Bowl remark. But I will be eager to see where their season goes from here without Chris Grier. All in all, this was a very satisfying win for a team that hadn't beat the Bills in 3 years. Now for Buffalo, this was worst case scenario because the Patriots also won, and we all know about New England's schedule, and they already beat the Bills in Buffalo earlier this year. And with how the Patriots are playing, I do not think this is an exaggeration to say the Bills will probably be a wild card team. Now I'm not overly concerned about one game, but I do believe Buffalo shot of winning the division is very low, and I think that's concerning for a team that would have to go on the road 3 straight times just to get to the Super Bowl, and as we know, competing and winning in the playoffs is a substantial difference. The Seahawks defeated the Cardinals with a score of 44-22, and the final score of this game is a lot prettier than how it was played. Seattle was up 28-0 with 14 minutes left in the second quarter and 38-7 at half, and DeMarcus Lawrence, yes, the defensive player DeMarcus Lawrence, had 2 touchdowns in this game. And to give you an idea of how much Seattle was in control of this game, Sam Darnold threw just 12 passes in Week 10. I love the Mike McDonald hire when it was made in the 2024 coaching process, but I'd be lying if I said I thought everything would be this good this fast. And there's been a running joke with Seahawks fans that they have no idea what a normal game was like, and I guess 44-22 is not a normal score, but they've put up 82 points since coming out of their bye and haven't had to sweat anything entering the second half. And I can't wait to see how they play against the Rams next week. With Arizona, 3-6 is obviously frustrating, but entering this game, Arizona actually had a positive point difference despite being 3-5. And in a lot of ways, I think Arizona more or less announced their season was over when they decided to roll with Jacoby Brissett, but my takeaway is kind of the same takeaway I've had for a few weeks with this team, really dating back to the Titans game. And it's that the roster isn't bad, it's that the leadership is not right for this team. And what I think will be unfortunate for Cardinals fans is I think they're going to finish with 6 or 7 wins and finish with anywhere from the 8th to 12th pick, just outside of prime quarterback range in the 2026 NFL Draft. The Rams beat the 49ers with a score of 42-26, and we mentioned earlier in the video about Jonathan Taylor being in the MVP conversation, and I think the other big player in the conversation at this point is Rams quarterback Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford finished the day with 280 yards and 4 touchdowns, and now has 25 touchdowns to just 2 interceptions on the year, and the Rams are absolutely rolling. They've put up 34 or more points in 3 straight games, and I do want to shout out Kyren Williams as well for having a 2-touchdown game in Week 10, but I feel like the Rams, despite playing in Los Angeles, are a very under-discussed team nationally. They are an elite football team, and not to take away from the Lions, Packers, or Eagles, but I wouldn't be surprised if we have an all-NFC West NFC Championship game. And next week with the Rams and Seahawks, well, the game will be absolute cinema. With the 49ers allowing 42 points with a backup quarterback is a death sentence for a win 99% of the time. And not only that, but the 49ers also have two former first-team All-Pro players out in Nick Bosa and Fred Warner, along with 2025 first-rounder Micah Williams for the year, among other injuries, and you can only do so much for so long. The 49ers also couldn't generate a pass rush with guys like Bryce Huff, Cleveland Farrell, and Keon White, and it probably will be a long second half of the season for this team defensively due to how injured they are. If there is a positive spin for the 49ers, their next 3 games are at the Cardinals, home against the Panthers, and at the Browns, and there's a path to being a 9-4 team entering their Week 14 bye. The Detroit Lions entered Week 10 having not put up more than 24 points since Week 5 against the Bengals, and I was a little concerned for this team if they didn't make a change at play calling because it wasn't working, especially with how much talent they have on the roster. And Dan Campbell confirmed to reporters that he took over offensive play calling in Week 10, that what was a collaborative effort, and Jared Goff had 320 yards and 3 touchdowns, Jahmyr Gibbs had 172 total yards and 3 touchdowns, and Jameson Williams, who has been quiet for a lot of the year, had his second 100-yard game as he had a 6-catch, 119-yard performance. This was huge for the Lions because they play the Eagles in Week 11 in what will be one of the most anticipated games of the 25 regular season. I never doubted the talent the Lions have offensively, just was a bit skeptical of the Lions' play calling over the past few weeks. And needless to say, especially after their 7th 500-yard game since the start of the 2022 season, they're back. With Washington, you're not going to win many games in which you allow 44 points and 546 yards of opposing offense, period. Whether your quarterback is Marcus Mariota, Jaden Daniels, or whoever, that is a losing recipe from the start. And they've now lost 5 straight games and are averaging 35.8 points allowed per game in those games. And forget Jaden Daniels missing time this year, that is the main takeaway for the 25 Commanders season. This is not a good roster, there's major holes, and in a lot of ways, they tried to put Flex Seal on the roster and trade or sign old veteran players in hopes of repeating an NFC Championship game appearance like they had last year. Obviously they're done, at least from a competitive standpoint, but maybe, just maybe, Joe Witt will be fired by the time you watch this video. We recently did a grading the 2025 NFL Draft midway through their rookie year that I think you'll enjoy, and if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe as it helps tremendously, and a little football will appear when you like the video. We're closing in on 220,000 subscribers, and I cannot thank you enough for the support, and until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.